Okay. Okay, we'll start with you, Lisa. We'll start with you to Spanish. No, what? Just, and then some Spanish interpretation to see the staff in the back. No, yeah, just in Spanish.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Y vamos a empezar en español. Si necesitan traducción o si necesitas ayuda, vamos a tener a alguien atrás quien le va a ayudar. ¿Quién está ayudando? Ah, aquí. Entonces, si necesitan ayuda y traducción en español, por favor, vea a la señorita por atrás, de atrás. Muchas gracias.
All right. Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Candace Perry, and I am the Environmental Justice Director at New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection. I want to thank all of you for gathering here today in person and online. We really appreciate it. So I am delighted to be sitting here with Sean LaTourette, the state's Commissioner for Environmental Protection, and Lisa Garcia, who is the US EPA Regional Administrator for Region 2, which includes New Jersey. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So we are gathered to speak with all of you today about environmental justice in Middlesex County. Unfortunately, there are some communities, because of their race, income, and how well they speak English, that experience more environmental burdens like flooding, air, water, and soil pollution than others. Those same communities tend to have less environmental benefits like green space and trees that cool and clean our air, soak up stormwater runoff, and provide relief from the effects of extreme heat. We know that environmental justice issues come in many forms and that they span across every region within our state, including in dense urban places and more suburban communities. Environmental injustices occur in inland communities and those along our rivers and bays. We know that in this region, minority and low-income communities are contending with a number of contaminated sites due to the legacy of industry in the region, and that many communities in Middlesex County have been and will be on the front lines of weather-related events like flooding and sea level rise as our climate gets warmer, and that the most vulnerable residents in Middlesex County will be hit hard. This is why it is so important for government to hear directly from those who are most impacted so that we can be informed of your daily lived experiences and then use that feedback to color the work that we do every day. So this is the second environmental justice stop on our tour this year, and we're very privileged to have visited 7 other counties on our EJ tour last year. And we plan to make a few more stops on our tour throughout the end of the year. So I want to give a special thanks to our partners who helped to make this event possible and for providing us a very warm welcome into the city of Perth Amboy. So first to Diane Roman and her team at the Jankowski Center. Thank you so much for providing your space to us and for hosting us in the center. To our colleagues from the city of Perth Amboy, Joelle Rosa, Tashi Vasquez, and William Kersenberger, thank you so much for your warm welcome on our tour earlier today and for all of your narration showing us around the city. And lastly, a special thanks and a huge point of appreciation to my team and my staff within the Office of Environmental Justice. If anyone has questions following today's meeting, you can always see my staff. They're in the back here and there for any questions. Thank you so much for your help in making tonight's event happen. So before we move on, I do want to quickly acknowledge and just spend a moment to ask if we have any elected or appointed officials in the room just to recognize your presence. Yeah, do you want to say who you are? Thank you so much, Councilman. Anyone else? Okay. And if there are any elected or appointed officials online, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat so that we may recognize your presence. Thanks so much for being here. And I do believe that we have a representative from Middlesex County, specifically the Middlesex County Department of Transportation. Yes. Khalid? Yes. Would you like to say a few remarks? And I think we're going to bring the mic to you.
Thank you very much, Director Kerry, Commissioner Sean Latourette, and Lisa. It's a privilege to be here today. First of all, to hear, we already know what a wonderful job the state is doing in terms of environmental justice and the plans to bring equity and justice to those that have been subject to that are compromised communities, basically, for all of the things that you just mentioned in your monologue. At the county, we basically are lockstep with the state when it comes to resilience, when it comes to environmental justice, when it comes to all of the things that you are looking to accomplish with the environmental justice and initiatives in that area. Specifically, the county is a very forward-thinking, progressive entity that basically has a game plan and a strategic outlook. And it's a master plan, but it's really not a master plan that sits on a shelf. It's a very active plan that is always being modified and enhanced as the days go. It's called Destination 2040, and that plan has several areas that it addresses, and the focus of that plan is to be ready in what does 2040 look like, and how, as a community, as a county, as a government agency, can we serve the community, be ready for the challenges that we face, whether they are environmental, whether they are economical, ecological, environmental, or other challenges in terms of resources, education. How can we have a workforce that is ready for 2040? And how do we really program the activities that we have to address those needs going forward? And every single component of that plan, there's about 40 elements, I think, has a component that involves environmental justice. We are happy to say that that is a key element of what we do. We have a number of projects in different areas, whether it is resilience, electric vehicles, smart investments, or the pursuit of grants, which are really out there to take advantage of federal grants that can basically address some of the things that you're talking about. Resiliency is a big component of that. And areas such as Perth Amboy, we not only rely on and go after aggressively public funding, we also invest our own dollars towards these activities. As recently, we have investment of about $1 million for resiliency and, flooding control and innovative and different ways of addressing this particular issue with regard to flooding, specifically in the challenged areas, in these areas. So we are pretty much lock sync and in step with all of the things that you are initiating at the state level and at the federal level also. And we are progressively working towards that goal, and we hope to partner with you and help you achieve your objectives. And our game plan basically encompasses every one of those objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I am going to run through our agenda today, which is pretty brief and simple. Soon I will pass over the floor to all of you all to raise your comment or your question or your concern for tonight's discussion about environmental justice in Middlesex County. But before we do that, I do want to pass it over to my fellow panelists to say their opening remarks just to prime the discussion. And then I will come back to you with a few housekeeping instructions, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll pass it over to Commissioner Latourette.
So first of all, wait, all right, I'm not going to move in too close because apparently my voice carries far enough without touching the microphone, and I should know better by now. Well, first of all, thank you to the city of Perth Amboy and the representatives of the city that are here with us this evening and have been throughout the day. We've been in the city, my DEP colleagues and I, since early afternoon. We had a chance to meet with the mayor. We also met with Speaker Coughlin, Assemblywoman Lopez, and a number of the city department heads that have showed us along on a tour of many parts of not just Perth Amboy, but adjacent areas to get a context for our conversation tonight. And what's really important to us at the Department of Environmental Protection, what is important to Governor Murphy, our First Lady, our entire cabinet, is the criticality of engaging with our communities. We operate under a principle that while we are thoughtful, or our intent is to be thoughtful stewards of statewide policy, but we can't make the best decisions sitting in an imposing government building in Trenton and think that we have all the right answers to the problems that come before us. But critically, part of our job is to get on the ground, to be in community with the people that we serve, to hear the issues that are of utmost importance to our neighbors, to our bosses, quite honestly, and to act based on what we hear. Candace talked about how what the lessons we learn shape the work that we do every day, and that's true. From our perspective at the Department of Environmental Protection, gone are the days where some obscure public notice arrives and maybe you treat it like you do junk mail and never pay attention to it, and don't have a sense or a good sense of what the government is doing. And the government should serve you. That is our job. And so we come into this community to hear from you, not to suggest we know all the answers. Quite honestly, I have no idea what folks may share this evening, and probably don't have a specific answer to most of the questions that we hear. But the import of this exercise is to hear those questions and to take them back with us and to use the feedback and the lived experience of the people we serve to shape the work that we do, because that's what government should do, right? We shouldn't tell folks how it ought to be. We should sit down with folks and hear how they want it to be, and then help them. And so that's what we're here to do this evening. And yes, we're doing that through the lens of environmental justice, because that is an imperative that drives all of our work. It doesn't mean just one thing. It requires us to look hard at the decisions that we make and the processes and policies and laws that form the basis of those decisions, and ask ourselves critical questions. Are we serving folks equitably? Are we sowing equity and doing justice with the decisions that we make? It's a hard question to ask, but it's one we have to ask of ourselves every day. And so the work that we do in this room tonight, it's the beginning of the beginning, really. And one thing that I will note, what we want to center in this conversation are the lived experiences of the people of Perth Amboy, and Middlesex County writ large. And so, Candace often asks that we try to narrow our questions or our dialogue to that concrete experience, as opposed to issues that may be farther flung. So we may try to cabin that in. I know that there are a lot of folks here that are interested in talking about the CPV power plant facility, either the CPV power plant facility that exists or the additional facility that is proposed to be located in Casby. What I'd ask is that everyone who is here who wishes to share a point of view or a question on that topic in particular, that you hold that topic, and we will treat that topic last, because we know from the feedback that we've received, many of the issues that will be presented. And in fact, they're sitting before the DEP in a particular permitting application. So what I'd like to do is hear all the other things that folks are concerned about in this city, in this county first. And then we'll go through what folks may have to share about that particular matter. And I just ask you to understand that my ability to respond directly to a question is somewhat limited. I will do my best, given that there is a decision that will sit in front of me on the matter. So I'll have to be judicious so as not to have the lawyers yell at me. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa for some opening remarks.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thanks again. It's always great to be on the road with my partners with New Jersey DEP. So thank you so much, Commissioner LaTourette and Candace, for all the great work and partnership. And of course, thank you to the city of Perth Amboy and everyone who was with us earlier on the tour. It really helps us when we can engage and be here in person to really hear what we're doing. And also, of course, thank you to Middlesex County. So just everyone who came out. So again, Lisa Garcia, Regional Administrator for EPA Region 2, which includes New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands, and also 8 Indian nations, mainly upstate New York. Our work is really at EPA is obviously to make sure that we're partnering with our states, with our local governments, but foremost to really make sure that we're serving the people here. And so we want to make sure that we get out, that we understand what the issues are, how it can improve our work at EPA. Most of you know, on the theme of environmental justice, President Biden, one of his first executive orders focused the federal government on making sure that we tackle the climate crisis and that we also really advance environmental justice. And the great thing about this opportunity that I have to work at EPA at this time is it was coupled with about over $100 billion in investments through the bipartisan infrastructure law and also through the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's a great moment for us to be able to make sure that we take this priority and we invest in the work that we're doing. And one of the initiatives to make sure that we invest in disadvantaged communities or overburdened communities is an initiative called Justice 40, which speaks to really making sure that the investments, that the funding that the federal government has, so EPA, that over $100 billion is invested in disadvantaged communities to really tackle, as Candace and the commissioner are saying, tackle the issues that communities have faced for many, many years, but for some reason have been under-resourced or underserved. This is the time that we want to take that next step and get the work done and really advance environmental justice. And so we're tasked with going out and speaking to communities, working with our partners. So these types of forums where we do the EJ roundtable has been really great to be on the ground to be on the ground in New Jersey, really listening to what the issues are, like I said, to make sure that we improve the work. So thank you again to Governor Murphy, to Commissioner LaTourette, to all of New Jersey DEP. And of course, I could not do it without the great team I have at EPA Region 2. Many are here. You can wave, say hello. I'm especially grateful for my Chief of Staff, Olivia Glenn, who hails from New Jersey and was the Deputy Commissioner at New Jersey DEP and joined us. So Olivia Glenn is here, and we're just making sure that we're doing the work, hitting the streets, as we say, and really making sure that we're listening and trying to meet communities where they're at and serve, as we're saying. So with that, I will turn it back to Candace. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for those opening remarks. So I want to turn the floor over to you all now. So I'll give you a few instructions. If you have a question or comment that you would like to raise, just feel free to raise your hand, and Myla Ramirez on my staff will run the mic over to you. So we'll just take it that way. I do want to echo the commissioner's sentiments that we're going to take or request to take comments and questions from residents of Perth Amboy first, and other residents of overburdened communities in Middlesex County, and then save all CPV related questions or comments to the end. If we do not get to your question or your comment for whatever reason, if we run out of time, we will hang out after the meeting for a little bit. So feel free to come up to us or to ask your comment or question to my staff in the back. Yeah, I got it. And so we have not forgotten about all of you online. We are monitoring you. So a couple of instructions for you. There is a way for you to raise your hand online. So it should be in your Zoom controls at either the bottom left hand or right hand of your screen, where you can just click raise your hand. And so we'll just kind of take you in the order of seeing the hands raised. We will call on you when it is your turn to unmute yourself and to ask your comment or question that way. Also, feel free to put comments and questions in the chat, and we can take them throughout the meeting. I'll try to say some out loud, and my team will also be responding in the chat as we go along through the meeting as well. And I do know that there are at least a few phone numbers, so people are calling in via phone. So again, there is a way to raise your hand. You want to press *9.
My goodness.
So *9 to raise your hand from your phone, and then we'll be able to see that online, and we'll call on you when it's your turn to unmute and ask your question. Please, all comments or questions should be pertaining to Middlesex County or have a statewide implication. Any other comments or questions, again, feel free to see us afterwards. So with that, we'll take the first question. Anybody want to start us off? Okay, we have one.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and if you're comfortable, share your name, and it's okay if you don't.
My name is Christine Leary. I'm an NYU student. I am going to the Center for Global Affairs, and I'm studying energy transition. And I'm not going to talk about energy, but as a resident of Perth Amboy, what I would like to know, and I don't know if you guys have specific answers, but I'm not sure if there's like city officials here, but like to what degree is code enforcement going to be enforced in this town? I have my own lived experience. I won't go into those details, but people, they do feel the impact of that. So I was just wondering, to what degree will code enforcement come up?
Can you give me a for instance, because I'm not sure what exactly you mean by code enforcement.
Which code?
Like, for example, in Perth Amboy, a number of homes have oil tanks. And some of them are in basements. And I had an instance, for example, where the HVA system, it was smoking out my whole house, and the fire department had to be contacted. And the landlord was diffused by the fire department and was told me, oh, disregard, nothing serious. And I was concerned for the safety of my family and myself. And a lot of other details associated, but point being, there are other code violations that crop up and, you know, so long as nobody's saying anything, nothing gets done.
Oh, like homeowner.
So that's my
Yeah,
comment.
no, I appreciate your sharing that, Christine, and thank you. While I can't speak for the city of Perth Amboy and its code enforcement, there are representatives. One of the council members is here. I'm sure that there's someone that can follow up with you on behalf of the city, and we can certainly take your information and connect with them about fire code and building code and things that we wouldn't, from the perspective of the Department of Environmental Protection, have a role in, right? The state has a particular role and set of authorities and things that we implement, and then so do the local governments as well. One of the things that we do in both enforce and offer assistance with does have to do with oil tanks that are that are still very commonly used by residential homeowners all across New Jersey. Now, typically, the way that we encounter those tend to be buried underground oil tanks, more so than above ground or those that are held in basements, but those still do exist. And you end up seeing them, of course, in the oldest of homes. Now, there's nothing that forces someone to transition from one fuel type for their home to another. And this is the subject of much public debate and to some degree rancor, right? Folks are worried that, I don't know, the government's going to run around and take their gas stove or something silly like that. You know, that's not a thing, to be very clear, it's not a thing. But there are many opportunities and forms of financial assistance available to folks who wish to make that kind of a switch. And it can be very beneficial both for public health and for the environment to make those switches. So one of the things that we can do as sort of an immediate follow-up is make sure that we are conveying to the city, to our local partners, what all of those resources are, so that they can be shared with residents, so that maybe your neighbors might take a look through those available opportunities and say, hey, it really makes sense for me to make that switch, better for my health, better for the environment. You're welcome.
BJ Torres, Perth Amboy resident. My questions pertain our current situation with our combined sewage overflow. Tomorrow evening at the city council meeting, the city council is going to be voting on the combined sewage overflow plan. And the price tag of the plan is over $300 million. And currently, the only means of covering this is through rate hikes. Not only are we an environmental justice community, but we're also a social justice community that has some of the lowest income and some of the highest rates in the county, or the highest rents in the county. 70% of our residents are renters, and a lot of this cost is going to be put on, the burden is going to be put onto the renters. So my question is how much funds are available for our environmental justice town to be able to address that price tag? And I know how much of Governor Murphy's $300 million in American Rescue Plan funds for the water infrastructure will go to our CSO plan. And how do we apply for these funds?
I am so glad that this is the second question, because one of the things that we spent some time on with the representatives of the city on our tour today was the combined sewer overflow issues. And these are issues that are near and dear to both Lisa and I's hearts. So you asked a couple of questions. The first was about price. The second was about funding. And the first was about price. And maybe you were just providing notice that the city was voting on it. And then the third was, how much are you getting? So the city, everyone should understand the CSO risks. And I would encourage anyone here that is a resident of Perth Amboy to pay attention to that meeting because it's important. I'm very aware of the CSO issues in Perth Amboy. The plans as we understand them could cost upwards of $350 million for the city. Now, for those who don't know what a CSO is, a combined sewer overflow it's a type of sewer system where the water that you flush, your sanitary waste, is combined in the same system, the same conveyance system as the water that falls, the rainwater, the stormwater. And that's an old way of doing things, having one system for both of these types of wastewater, the storm and the sanitary. And what happens when it rains too hard, that sanitary sewage can come right into our communities or our waterways without treatment. And that's a really terrible thing. And it plagues over 20 cities in our state, all of them environmental justice communities. The answer of how much money is there to help you, hundreds of millions of dollars are there to help you. And the place that you need to go is to nj.gov/DEP/WIIP for the Water Infrastructure Investment Plan. Because Lisa has generously given us a lot of money. And it is Lisa's job and my job to spend that money helping our communities tackle these problems. And if I don't, she's going to really be upset with me. And she's kind of my boss in a way. And so together, the DEP and the EPA are here to deploy those funds. But what we need to make sure of is that the city is well positioned to take advantage of the next funding round, which opens in July. And how much the city can get is dependent upon how ready the city is with its plans, with its applications to put into our system. And so if you go to that website, you'll be able to read all about it. You'll see that you're on our priority list for funding. And what that means is there's a mixture of free money, grant funding, or what we call principal forgiveness, which is a loan you don't have to pay back, basically a grant, and then very low interest loans that are available from the DEP. Because we take Lisa's money, we add our own money, and then we add money from our infrastructure bank in the state to try to help make the biggest impact we can. So there's a lot available for you. It'll take the form of many years to come. And so every year there's a new application for the next, usually these projects are in phases. And so phase 1 in year 1, phase 2 in year 2, so on and so forth. But I know Lisa wants to make sure that we spend this money helping environmental justice communities. So maybe a thought on that you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I would just say it's great that you're in the pipeline or thinking of it already. And so I know that a lot of times these costs just seem overwhelming, or that a city or village can't tackle it. And so this is really the opportunity that we're talking about at the federal government with this additional funding, is to try to get in the pipeline now. So it's great that you're on the priority list. Please check in on all the technical assistance that's available through EPA and DEP to make sure that you can get into that kind of pipeline of funding and the phases. Because as the commissioner said, we have this wonderful opportunity, lots of money. It's a forgivable loan, as the commissioner said, and it needs to be spent. And these are the kind of projects that we're looking forward to hearing about and to supporting. And so we work in partnership with DEP, and we do have a little bit of oversight on their final intended use plan. And of course, like I said earlier, with this Justice 40 initiative, also making sure that places like Perth Amboy are on that priority list. So yeah, so we want to hear from you some more and help get that going.
And these
great,
types of
yeah.
funds are available for every
Yeah.
municipality in Middlesex County and beyond.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting into the pipeline, as it were, and being the funds being administered. It is not all free money, to be clear. But by putting the free money with the low interest money, the way that you sequence repayments can give a local government very low debt service. It is not the case that the only way to do this is on the back of a ratepayer. We don't want that to happen.
Another point to add on to that is the concept of stormwater utilities, if people in the room are familiar with that. So it's basically the concept of either utilizing an existing authority, so like your wastewater utility or your sewer utility within the city, or creating a new form of government where a fee will be charged to property owners based on the amount of impervious cover. So hard surfaces, concrete, asphalt, how much of that is within the city, and charging a fee to those property owners. So not directly to the residents or the ratepayers, but to those who have the most impervious cover within the city. And so we've given out grants to do feasibility studies. So for the city or for the water utility to understand what process or mechanisms would it need to take to set up that authority and to charge the fee, how much would the fee cost, and what projects could that revenue fund? So it could fund CSO projects and green infrastructure, stormwater projects. So I'm not sure if the funding for that will be reauthorized this year, but we are awarding some municipalities who have applied for those feasibility study grants. And there may be some future sources of money. So I encourage you to look into that. Stay in communication with us so we can make you aware when those funds might be available again for a stormwater utility.
Yeah, let's see where this current budget lands us.
Yeah.
So make sure your legislators hear what you'd like to see in your communities.
And I'll just add quickly that the funding, the federal funding can be used as a combination of the gray infrastructure and green infrastructure. So on our tour earlier, we did hear of the plans to continue to build parks or green space. And so that's certainly a combination the cities and towns can look into.
Thanks. I have one up front, Mila.
Also about the CSO. So Wednesday, the city is going to ask to increase our sewer rate 44%. Do we have to pass a plan with a financing plan of our own accord before we apply for these grants? Can we put off? I mean, we haven't really had public meetings about the CSO. No one in our community knows about it. There was no State of the City address this year talking about the $330 million infrastructure investment the city was going to make. I think that, a lot of people went and looked at the 300 million that Murphy had put aside for, of American Rescue Funds for the CSOs. We wondered where was Perth Amboy in there? And I saw us listed in the list of projects. So we were already listed in the pipeline, it looked like. So how much of the 300 million that was allocated for the CSO plans has been allocated to Perth Amboy?
Nothing.
Why?
So part of it, yeah. So part of that has to do with making sure that the application for that funding is being pursued. So portions of that money are still available, but there's funding independent of that designation. The 300 million that you're referring to is one part of an overall water infrastructure investment plan that has lots of different sources of funding. So just because an application didn't come in for that specific line item that was available doesn't mean that you're foreclosed as a city from taking advantage of the principally forgiven dollars that are available. You're in fact very much eligible. It's just a matter of making sure that the applications are coming in. And I did have a conversation this afternoon with your mayor and many other folks from the city agencies. So we are offering added assistance to the city to make sure that we get applications in the door so that we can make sure that Perth Amboy takes advantage of the opportunities that are available. You're welcome.
Go for it.
Good evening. Bill Schultz, Red Riverkeeper. I was on a committee that helped develop a long-term control plan for Perth Amboy. Once that plan was basically developed, we were told, wait for the DEP, not to throw stones at you. Wait for the DEP to review some of the plans that were existed. We've got, was it 21 communities with CSOs? And currently, I think you're evaluating 3 plans. So would it be, is it proper for us or beneficial for us to start in Perth Amboy to start moving ahead with a plan when your review of somebody else's plans will liable to have a hard impact on what we've basically decided to do? And I don't want to get caught in the middle of having some funds expire.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that question. And so thank you for that. And thank you for the work that you do through your organization. So I think there's a confusion of 2 different things that the DEP does in your question, because we do a whole lot of things, right? We finance hundreds of millions of dollars of environmental infrastructure every year, right? We also have to permit the facilities that discharge wastewater into our rivers and streams and make sure that the pollution that is coming out is not too high to threaten our water quality. And so there's these 2 things that are happening at the same time, both us preparing to make the water infrastructure investments and also for us to issue new permits that have all the different types of conditions that make sure that the water quality is maintained and improved. So the long-term control plans is a permitting element. And so there is new CSO permits being issued to every one of those 21 communities, Perth Amboy included. 3 of those 21 communities have been permitted so far this year. We're hoping to get all the rest out by the end of the year into early next year. These are, it may sound easy, oh, a permit, it's just a document. These are highly technical evaluations. And what they determine is the length of time for implementation, because a $350 million long-term control plan can take up to 20 years to fully implement. And so what we need to decide is what happens in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, then 6. We were trying to group them in stages, and then looking through those long-term control plans that are presented. In some instances, folks said, oh, we're going to do the green infrastructure later and do the gray infrastructure up front. And what actually makes more sense is to front load more green infrastructure. So our permits are making that clear in many instances. And so Perth Amboy will receive a new CSO permit. That is in the works, and so will all of the rest of the communities. But there are near-term engineering design and construction elements that you want to get in the funding pipeline, right? So these are these 2 things happening at the same time: your permitting and your financing, right? And so I think your question kind of confused the permit for the financing. We can do both at the same time. The near-term projects can be financed while new permits are going out and being refined.
So I want to read a comment and question from Catherine Riss from online. She is from Piscataway. And so she says, due to the silting, the Raritan River gets backed up and becomes a soup bowl when we get heavy rains and storms. During Ida, it got so bad that my neighbors in Birchview Apartments were flooded up to the 2nd-story windows. Some walked out through chest-high water. Others were taken out by boat, and dozens of cars were totaled by flood waters. Is there a way to get the river dredged so that this doesn't keep happening? It is silted up at the 287 overpass. Can that be cleared so that water would flow down into the ocean? We would need state authority, as I'm told that the Raritan is not a federal river, so the Army Corps of Engineers can't do it.
This is a really, really great question. And I love the hard questions come early, you know? It's great. Thank you, Catherine, for that question. It's actually one that we get a lot. So I'm going to try to answer it as best I can, and then we can follow up with more information. This is a question that we received about waterways all over the state of New Jersey in the aftermath of tropical storm Ida. We probably got, I can't estimate, dozens upon dozens of phone calls, and they all went something like this right after Ida. I have the itsy bitsy brook in the back of my house, and the itsy bitsy brook has been there for 30 years and it has never flooded like this before. What went wrong? Who didn't clean out the itsy bitsy brook? Who's supposed to take care of the itsy bitsy brook? The answer to the last question is all of us. We're all supposed to take care of our environment, and we're supposed to do it together. It's the only way that we maintain the natural resources that we have and improve them. But we're confronted by a couple of really serious issues. We have a high density of development in really tight, constrained watersheds, right? Everything exists in a watershed. Our homes, our businesses, our roadways, everything is in a watershed. But we have lots of little tributaries and large rivers all over the place, right? We're a water-rich state. And we've experienced an increase in precipitation, a market increase in the last 23 years. And when we project forward, those increases go up more and more. The DEP just put out a new inland flood protection rule to better prepare us for this reality, to update our stormwater standards and our flood elevations. And the answer to these flooding issues, they don't really lie in river dredging. It can feel a little obvious. It could feel like that might be the common sense solution. Everything seems to be flowing down into this river, and it's lower than my home. I mean, I live in Highland Park, New Jersey, so I know the Raritan very well. And there was water near my doorstep during Ida. And I live at one of the highest points in my town. And we can think of this as like, oh, if we just create more of a deeper river bottom, all the water will flow there. But dynamics of watersheds and hydro geology and is so much more complicated than that. And dredging rivers actually isn't the answer. It's impractical in for a lot of reasons. But the real way to better manage those flood risks is to upgrade our stormwater infrastructure, right? Not just our CSOs, but all of our sewer infrastructure, which we have a great opportunity to do with new assistance dollars from the EPA. And the other is stormwater utilities, like Candace had mentioned, and planning to manage more water, making sure that folks are using porous pavement wherever they can to absorb more water. But dredging rivers, unfortunately, just won't get us there. It seems intuitive, but it actually doesn't work that way. I'm sorry if that answer is unsatisfying, Catherine, but it is the truth.
Sean, it's totally unsatisfying because this is a life.
Catherine, I see that you are attempting to respond. I think the team will unmute you. So hold on just one second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sean, I'm glad you have a nice, high elevation home in Highland Park. I live on the banks of the Raritan. It's right outside my window. The river ran through our basement up to the ceiling, took out everything we had down there. It's life threatening. It's not good enough for you guys to say, oh, well, dredging's not a solution. What solution do you have? Because since they built the Greenbrook flood control project, all that water gets dumped a mile upstream from us into the Raritan, and we get it. And it could kill us. Now, I don't want that to happen. I don't think you do either. So don't just tell me you can't dredge the river. Give me a solution that will work if that one won't. Because otherwise your answer is totally unsatisfying.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know that the answer about the river dredging not being the answer is unsatisfying, but there is an answer, and there are specifically 5 things that can be done, right? So the first is watershed-wide stormwater planning. And that is a service that we help support from the DEP by providing grants to local governments. So one of the things that we can do is make sure Piscataway, Catherine, is aware of those grant opportunities. The second thing that we can do is stormwater asset identification so that we can plan and help to finance upgrades for stormwater infrastructure, because that is very seriously the key to better managing the water. And we have resources available for that. So we can also make sure that your locality is aware of that. And then the third is what Candace had mentioned on stormwater utility to provide the long-term governance structure for managing increasing demands on our watersheds, and to provide localities with the mechanism for making continued investment in both green and gray infrastructure over time, because this old infrastructure will take a long time to better position to respond to increasing rainfall. The fourth thing that is important to evaluate is through climate resilience planning, which is another service that we provide to local governments, and we'll make sure that Piscataway has that as well. It's called the Resilient New Jersey Municipal Climate Resilience Planning Toolkit. We can identify where creating more flood storage might make sense for your community, and then strategically using state acquisition or Blue Acres dollars to create more flood storage through voluntary buyouts of really vulnerable properties, and then using those properties to both provide for stormwater benefits and also create greater beautification in the community. Now, those are 5 things that we can do. That is the network of solutions to flooding. It's complicated, but it's achievable.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure Piscataway has all of that information. And thank you again.
And I would add that the federal government is also working on these things, once again, with our partners in the state or local governments, local municipalities. And so there's a lot of funding that is available for the, coastal flooding, for urban flooding, focus on climate resiliency and obviously adaptation and preparedness. And so one of the things that we did, and New Jersey was one of the first states to sign up, is to share with EPA and the federal government the plans for this climate resiliency. What are the climate plans? So that in 2024, and we understand that this is long-term planning, but unfortunately, it took us a long time to get here, and it's going to take a little while to get us out of this mess. But we have about over $4 billion coming out next year in 2024 to be able to really fund these projects that the commissioner was talking about across the country. And of course, Department of Energy and Department of Transportation also have funding available for these issues around resiliency, because flooding is a huge concern for everybody, that we understand. Unfortunately, the precipitation and the events, the rain events, the storm events are getting worse, and we need to prepare for it and be ready for it. So anyway, so we're working on these issues, and there's a lot of information on the federal side also for those types of grants.
Thank you.
Follow-up question to that from Paul Sowers from online. How do you implement watershed-wide planning, given that New Jersey is a home rule state?
Very carefully and with a lot of cooperation from the local governments who want to stop the flooding.
Yeah.
Anyone? And yes.
I just
Okay.
wanted to
This
clarify
person.
that a lot of this obviously is left up to the municipalities to create the projects and request the money. But is there anything legislatively that would require different standards for permeable surfaces, especially in new construction or rehabilitative, areas. Because I'm in Edison, off 27, it's, from the storefront to the street, it's all cement, concrete.
Yeah. It's a really great question. I didn't catch your name, but you look so familiar, so I know we've met before. So it's a great question. No, there is no state legislation that I'm aware of that requires the use of more porous materials, whether that is for a parking lot or a roadway. When Nancy Pinkin was in the legislature representing Piscataway and other areas of Middlesex County, this was a passion of hers. I don't know, I've not heard of another legislator since pinking it up post her departure. There are a number of benefits that we can offer, like relative to additional funding and scoring points in these grant projects for folks who make those choices. But it is not a mandate of any kind, but it is definitely a key to reducing the flooding. There's not a doubt.
Okay, and we'll go
Thank
to
you.
you next.
John Chu from Edison. Just want to comment about the alternatives to fossil fuels. I was really happy to see Commissioner LaTourette at the rally for the for the offshore wind. Just based on what I've learned, any negatives from offshore wind is not worse than fracking and using natural gas for energy. And I think that's important for environmental justice communities, that we have this alternative energy for usage. Another thing is there's a community solar program with the BPU, and I'm supportive of that from what I've seen, from what I've learned from the Board of Public Utilities. So it's a state program. One issue with that I've seen is that the lower income communities are not signing up at the same rate as other communities, because I think what they do is they open it up for maybe like half the plots are for regular or for everyone, for the whole community, but the other half is for low income. But either low income communities are not aware, or they're not really trusting of these type of programs. And I'm not sure if there's anything that the environmental justice department can do to help advocate for that, for those lower communities to sign up at a higher rate. And I do have another question, and I know there's a lot. My other question is concerning Green Acres. So, I do have a concern of change of use for Green Acres. I did not realize that was something that was possible to be done. In Edison in particular, there's a change of use at the Middlesex College, Thomas Edison Park, and I know that falls under the DP, but that is, South Edison is a lower income community compared to North Edison, but also it is the Middlesex College where people of lower incomes can go to pursue higher education. And I'm concerned that they're going to tear up the land there and put in artificial turf soccer fields, and just the ease with that can happen. To me, that's a concern. I don't know, for not just from Edison, but for perhaps other places as well. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of 1,200 spots for parking. I don't think that's going to be impervious ground like Esther wants. So yeah, so those are my two concerns.
I appreciate all of that. One of the things that springs to mind relative to the Green Acres question, which is of the many things the DEP does, we steward our Green Acres program, which means we administer roughly $100 million a year of investments in open space and parks development, local parks development. So we help our counties and our local governments buy land to make more parks and to improve those parks. One of the things that Green Acres does permit is the use of synthetic turf material. Now, the thing to understand about that material is it is in many ways also impervious. So what happens when the choice is made to use synthetic turf, there is a greater stormwater management burden that gets worked upon the site. So you end up having to do more stormwater management that could take up space that impervious turf fields are creating a runoff effect. There are some really forward-thinking projects. A couple at Princeton University come to mind where they're doing athletics on top with storm water management underneath. Now these are more complex projects, but deeply beneficial. Obviously more costly to do things in that manner, but it's in a way sort of gone are the days where we use land for only one purpose. And we've got to think about how we achieve multiple ends with one piece of land, how we manage our watershed, how we're reducing flooding, creating new development opportunity. All of that can be done in one space. It does require us to think a little differently. And so Green Acres does provide greater incentives for folks that are thinking in that bigger frame.
On the, can I just mention something on the solar and then you can go on the community solar? That's a really good recommendation or point to highlight that the state and in the summer, the federal government's going to go out with a lot of money for community solar, both from the Department of Energy and from EPA. And so we always talk about leveraging money with the state, the local government, and now the federal funding, how we can really get at this issue. And one of the priorities is to make sure that low-income communities that haven't taken advantage of Department of Energy's grants or funding, really take advantage of this. So we will take this back because we're still in the design phase or finalizing this. It's going to be for the EPA side, it's $7 billion for municipalities, like you mentioned, to work on those types of projects for community solar or maybe, local government solar projects. And then the Department of Energy, I believe, is coming out with $100 billion. Of course, it's across the United States, but that's a lot of incoming funding. And the whole point is we want municipalities that don't have the resources to take advantage of this. And so the outreach is going to be a huge component to making sure that we get it right and we get it to the communities that need it the most. So I really appreciate your comment. Because we'll have a lot of work to do with partners like you and everyone else. But
just a question on that, Lisa, so that we could have our questioner follow up with you.
Yeah.
Is that community solar investment through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction
yes,
Fund?
that's
Okay.
part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Yeah. So so maybe we can I'm looking at Nikki. Maybe we can provide this website towards the end. I'll just mention it a few times at the end of where the federal government is kind of housing information on this new funding as a starter. And then we can make sure to stay in touch with folks. Yeah.
Super cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll get that website for everyone in a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is David Hughes. I'm here representing the Rutgers AUP AFT Faculty and Grad Union. We have 6,000 members across the
You just
state.
break down.
Can you say what that
those
is?
letters?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Rutgers, AAUP AFT. It's just the union, the largest union at Rutgers University.
Oh, union.
And we represent 6,000 people, mostly in Middlesex County. Thank you. I'm also a human being who likes to breathe.
Me too.
And I had difficulty doing that last week.
Yeah.
Did anybody have a problem breathing last week on planet Earth?
Mhm.
Okay, you guys had problems breathing?
Mhm.
Right. Now, we know, we think you guys know, this is because we are at 419 parts per million of CO2, lots of parts of CH4 as well. And forests are drying out. There's drought in Canada, leading to greater fuel load, hotter fires, more intense fires, more lightning strikes, more difficult to put out, right?
All true.
And all because of fossil fuels, right?
I wouldn't say all because of fossil fuels. I would say all because of, primarily because of anthropogenic sources. Majority of those fossil fuels.
Fine.
But there's plenty of
Everybody-
other things that contribute.
Everybody in agreement with the commissioner that we're talking about a problem primarily caused by fossil fuels, okay?
Yeah.
So New Jersey, the East Coast was an environmental justice community last week, right? I could not go outside. I followed the public health warnings that said, stay inside. And I tried to do that. I had my chest hurt. My throat is still hurting. My eyes were watering.
It's terrible.
It was at the worst DEP, the DEP quality, or sorry, the EPA quality of air was at the worst
Mhm.
on
In our
their
lifetimes.
scale.
Yes, and
So you guys failed last week.
Mhm.
You failed us on the air that we breathe. And I'm surprised that this isn't the leading issue that we're talking about tonight. It should be, because you need air before you need anything else. So you failed. Now, I know you can say, well, it's not just us that failed. It's a million.
No, it's
people.
all of us. We've all failed.
No,
The
policy-
1980s were the
policy-
lost decade to get
Yeah,
climate
but-
under control, and we
Policy-
failed.
The policymakers failed particularly badly, but not just you. So I'm not going to ask you to account for the failure of policymakers over decades. I'm just going to ask you not to make the problem worse. Can you do that?
Yes.
All right. Well, I think then you gave me the answer I wanted to hear about the CPV power plant and all the other fossil fuel projects proposed for this state, because each one of them makes the problem worse, Commissioner Lazzaretti. All right? You know, you're nodding. Good. And you was in answer to this question, you once said, oh, but you and Viros should love the natural gas plants because they're better than coal. Not true when you count the leaks upstream, as I think you know. You also said that we should love
Wait,
this.
are you quoting me?
Yeah, it was a meeting. It was a meeting. I was online, of course. It was a meeting at Rutgers.
Doesn't
during the
sound
pandemic.
like something I'd say.
You, well, good. Then you're taking it back. That's great. You also said that we environmentalists, which is to say people who like to breathe, that we should embrace the natural gas plants because of all the EVs that are coming on. They're going to need electricity.
It most certainly did not.
I'm glad you didn't. So you're with me then that we need to stop all this new fossil fuel infrastructure so that you don't make the problem worse. That's your responsibility. You can prevent the problem from getting worse and be remembered by your children and by your communities for doing that.
I appreciate your passion very much. Thank you.
So we're going to go to Jenny, who's online and has her hand raised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Increíbles cosas que están haciendo y hablan de mucho presupuesto, pero quiero traer algo a ustedes que obviamente me dicen que ustedes han ido en un tour, ¿verdad? Y conocen o conocieron la ciudad. No sé si tal vez pasaron por Market Street, por Elm Street, por State Street y se dieron cuenta la clase de viviendas que tenemos en Perth Amboy, ¿sí? Hablamos ya de una crisis de vivienda que se ve empeorada por la crisis climática. Están hablando de que sus casas se inundaron, ¿sí? Que algunos viven en casas bastante cómodas y altas, que no sufrieron ningún problema. Pero si ustedes se han fijado, y ya lo han dicho, ya lo dijo un señor acá, mucha de la población de Perth Amboy vive de alquileres, ¿verdad? Todas las casas o la mayor parte de casas son alquiladas. La crisis climática se ve reflejada en esas casas viejas y edificios de malas condiciones por las que nuestra comunidad está sufriendo, ¿sí? Entonces yo les pido a ustedes, sí, que están en este momento en esta reunión y que están bastante preocupados por la crisis climática, que se den cuenta que esta crisis climática también se ha visto empeorada en la crisis de vivienda de nuestra comunidad. Y como organización estamos preocupados y tengo un par de miembros que están en esta reunión y están escuchando para saber qué solución vamos a tener nosotros, los de la comunidad trabajadora, comunidad muchas veces excluida de todos los beneficios que nos están diciendo, ¿sí? Han visto que en Pertamboy, ¿cuáles casas o qué casas tienen paneles solares, por ejemplo, para mejorar la calidad de vida? ¿Sí? No sé si en su tour se dieron cuenta. Creo que nadie en Pertamboy o muy pocos. ¿Por qué? Otra vez, porque la mayoría de personas en Pertamboy alquilamos casas, no somos propietarios, ¿sí? Entonces, más que pregunta, lo que yo les quiero pedir a ustedes es que asesoren a quienes tenemos por electos en nuestra comunidad de Pertamboy para que la comunidad sea parte de las decisiones, ¿sí? Hemos asistido a algunas reuniones, pero ¿cuál es el problema? No hay traductores. Y en este momento quiero agradecer a quien nos invitó como organización a esta reunión, porque hay un excelente traductor, pero tomen en cuenta que la comunidad de Pertamboy es comunidad hispana, ¿sí? Y aunque es obligación nuestra aprender el inglés, también es un derecho que tenemos de tener traductores, ¿sí? Entonces, gracias porque en esta reunión estamos entendiendo y mi comunidad, la comunidad entiende y mis compañeros que están en la llamada entienden, pero quisiera comentar eso, ¿no? La crisis climática se ve reflejada en la crisis de vivienda y lo que dijo el compañero anterior a mí es verdad. Nuestros compañeros la semana pasada tuvieron crisis de salud por lo mal que estaba el clima. ¿Y quién hizo algo de eso? Nadie, ¿sí? Veo a ustedes que están muy preocupados ahora, pero es la primera vez que escucho que en Middlesex se quiere hacer algo del clima. También dicen que hay muchísimos recursos, pero ¿cuándo la comunidad inmigrante, ¿sí? La comunidad trabajadora va a tener acceso, ¿sí? ¿Cuándo nos dan este tipo de información? Entonces, como repito, tengo esos pedidos como organización. Mader o New Jersey está involucrada en crisis climática, quiere trabajar para mejorar, pero también queremos que los electos de nuestra ciudad y nuestro condado nos tomen en cuenta de manera más asertiva y tomen en consideración también todas las condiciones en las que estamos pasando. Y para terminar, muchos hablaron de las inundaciones y sus casas dañadas. Cuando nosotros vemos en Pertamboy las lluvias, simplemente las lluvias fuertes que caen, hacen que el agua pase a través de los techos de las casas de nuestros miembros de la comunidad, sin que haya inundaciones, básicamente por el mal estado de las casas, ¿sí? Sean edificios o sean casas. Entonces, sí quiero que tomen en cuenta estos comentarios porque es lo que la comunidad está pasando en este momento en Pertamboy y que cada vez se va a ver más afectado. Otro ejemplo mínimo de crisis climática es que las calles donde vive gente blanca, gente que tiene recursos económicos mucho más elevados que la gente inmigrante, ¿sí? Tienen calles completamente limpias y claro, es nuestra responsabilidad también, pero también ahí hay pequeñas cosas, ¿no? Cómo es que recogen la basura, cómo es que en ciertos sectores distribuyen mejores basureros o basureros de colores, mientras que en las comunidades inmigrantes o de clase trabajadora no tenemos. Y todo esto hace que la crisis climática nos afecte más, ¿sí? Entonces, con estos comentarios me quiero retirar y agradecerles otra vez por tener traductor y porque la gente de la comunidad está aquí, está escuchando y está entendiendo por fin que alguien se está preocupando, pero que no solo queden palabras y que no solo nos digan vayan al link, vayan allá, pueden enterarse, impriman documentos, inviten y salgan a la comunidad a decir lo que está pasando. Y van a ver que en una próxima reunión no van a tener 4 miembros de la comunidad inmigrante, sino quizás 50, ¿sí? Así que por favor les pido que estos comentarios como Mader o New Jersey y como comunidad sean también tomados en cuenta. Gracias.
So Lisa,
So what do we want?
We have
Eh,
our online interpreter who can interpret, or do you want to just take it?
So our interpreter could read back for everybody's benefit, but in the interest of time, maybe Lisa, could offer a little bit of summary so that we can be more immediately responsive.
Pues señora, yo voy a tratar de hacer un resumen, pero yo sé que has dicho mucho y que muchas gracias y que ojalá la próxima vez si sale, si viene 50 personas más porque vamos a tener traductores. Y gracias al traductor, the woman who was speaking said that she's very grateful that there is an interpreter because it helps her understand and avails herself of this opportunity. And so she said that next time she'll let her neighbors know so that others can come out with the realization and understanding that they will be able to understand this public hearing. So that was one piece. Sorry, that she mentioned. I don't, she was mentioning that there's so many injustices that play into how a community is living and how they can take advantage of resources or not take advantage of resources, not be able to understand even the information or know where to access the information. And that a lot of these, and we always talk about this, the social determinants of health, the climate crisis is just one. Oh, thanks. Thank you. And so, and she did mention also, I think someone raised this earlier, that Perth Amboy has a high population of renters. And so it is really upon us as government leaders, as local leaders, to make sure that we are communicating this type of information and making sure that not only we're talking to, and I'm just translating here, but the white people and the wealthier people, but how do we make sure that they can participate in the decision-making and planning for the community and for their town. And that last week there was a huge health crisis because of the air quality, and that communities like hers feel like they don't have the resources to understand where to even access the information and get that information. So, and there was also a concern around flooding and garbage collection, that certain parts of town seem very clean and able to be resilient against flooding and climate events, and other parts of town with less income or fewer resources don't see the same clean streets and availability to bounce back or be resilient against floods and climate events. And also, if you look at where their solar panels are, it's also in the wealthier areas, and how do the lower income areas take advantage of the solar panels. So what I can say, I hope someone's actually translating this back to her. Yes, okay. Is that we have a commitment to make sure, obviously, along with New Jersey DEP, to make sure that these meetings are interpreted or translated. And sorry, and we also want to make sure that the information and the material is in Spanish also. So we agree that we have to do a better job at getting the information out, and we will try to make sure that we communicate that through either the chat or get the information of, maybe the woman would be willing to share her information to help disseminate the information in Spanish. And I'll just say also other languages. So if people know that there are other languages that we should be communicating in and being able to deliver this information, please let us know.
And I just want to say, Jenny, I think that you're from Make the Road, New Jersey. My office would love to have some ongoing discussions with your organization about all the ways that we can do a better job to incorporate the needs of populations that speak Spanish or other languages, and make sure that they get the resources and the information that we share every day to English speakers, also out to communities like yours. And so I hope that this is not the first and the last conversation that we can have. And you shared a lot of great recommendations and points in your remarks. Would love to follow up offline soon. So thank you for that.
Can I Can I just mention one more thing that maybe I didn't mention at the beginning? Another part of the work that we're really trying to do is understand the or meet the need of capacity. We have heard for many, many years, community groups are just starting out, or grassroots groups don't have the capacity to maybe even get a 501c3 to be able to apply for a grant. And so one of the things that EPA just announced last month, the administrator announced 17 different thriving communities, technical assistance centers. Thank you, Olivia. We call it the TIC-TAC because we love acronyms. So the TIC-TACs are a very important resource for communities. And I would just offer up that one of them is at the Interamericana Universidad in Puerto Rico. So there's one in Puerto Rico. And I'm just thinking that that might be a great entree into understanding what type of funding is available. We have environmental justice grants, climate justice grants, but this TIC-TAC, this center, is to help with that, even just capacity building. How does one write a grant? What do I need to write a grant? What's the universe of federal funding out there? I don't even know. And then we also have one base that will be working more with New Jersey and New York. It's a partnership between New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, We Act in New York. Anyway, and I think Rutgers is actually a part of it. So we'll make sure that we share that information also, because technical assistance to be able to access some of the funding, community groups need that technical assistance, and this is really meant to hopefully meet that need. And so it's $10 million for each TIC-TAC over the next 5 years. And so we'll share that information also.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks. And thank you for the water.
So there are 3 more people online. I want to go to them first. And so Audra.
Yes, hi, my name is Audra Sabara. I am a Metuchen, New Jersey resident. I want to thank everyone for making the time to be here this evening and allowing us to provide feedback. I'm asking a question specifically to anyone on the panel that can help me understand a little bit more about why the recently enacted environmental justice law does not include, as I understand it, the Keysby power plant, which is proposed.
Audra, I will absolutely answer that question. I'm going to group it with all the folks who want to talk about CPV. So just hang on and let's make sure we hear the other remaining questions that folks had to raise, because I want to finish those and then we'll talk CPV.
Okay, so there's someone online who's called in on their phone. It's like, I don't know your name, but the phone caller. Please unmute yourself. You just dial *9. *9.
Yes, good evening. My name is Sharon Huberman, and I am a resident in the city of Perth Amboy. And I would like to thank you for today's presentation. It's really appreciated. But I would like to also highlight the concerns that I have regarding all of the city residents in my community in terms of not only their air quality, but also the water quality. Back in 2019, most of the city residents were alerted of some contaminants that exceeded the MCL levels. And while that has been rectified, what my deepest concern is the Runyon watershed, which sits nearby a Superfund site, which was supposed to undergo some sort of cleaning. There was a procedure. I attended those meetings. I've even written to the NJDEP. However, in looking at our water quality report, our recent water quality report, I see that the 1,4-dioxane level continues to exceed the 0.35 parts per billion. I don't know why that is. I'm very concerned about it. And I would like to know what is the NJDP going to do to address all of these emerging contaminants that appear in our water. We wash with that water on a daily basis. We cook, we clean, we wear the clothes that we washed. And even though they say, oh, well, you have to drink a lot of gallons and gallons of water to be impacted, the reality is this. Those metrics and those measures are based upon an individual who weighs 150 pounds. And it is translating like a gallon or 2 gallons, but you're not looking at the overall exposure of a person who may be of petite structure, a child, or a variety of how you use the water and the exposure that is within the water. So the water quality, most definitely, I wish that our aging infrastructure could be completely new. But that is a process, and it takes a lot of investment from and planning, smart planning regarding upgrading the aging infrastructure. But what I find interesting is that other towns have received water filters, and I don't see that that is made available to us. So I would like to see that. And that's regarding just the water quality. And that's to take away the PFAs, which is also an emerging contaminant, any secondary contaminants that go through the cleaning process, such as the bromates, that can go up or down, because the only solution right now that we have is the mixing, it's the blending of the water to bring our water below those MCL levels so that it is drinkable. And I just find that highly acceptable, especially since the ones that have contributed to this problem and this issue are contaminators, are these chemical companies that have polluted or have been near our water streams and have massively over the years aggregated the pollution. So that's being in the city of Perth Amboy regarding the water quality. My second concern is the air quality. Since 2000, I would say about maybe going more than 4 years ago, our air quality has severely been impacted. During COVID, our residents were the most hit by COVID. We unfortunately lost many lives in my community, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that if you have a respiratory illness and then the quality of your air is not going to allow you to even repair your lungs to get better, then it will pose a great difficulty to the functioning of your body. And I don't know when exactly the Casby power plant, I don't want to discuss it. I'm talking about the air quality. The air quality in Perth Amboy has been horrendous. There have been times when I have called the NJDP to report the air quality, and the response that I've received, oh, do you smell it now? I said, well, yes, I do smell it, but I don't know the location of it, and you won't send anyone. And I know that you have air quality measurements at different places in New Jersey. I would really want one to be in Perth Amboy, because at certain times of the day, especially at nighttime, because it always happens when I have to take out the garbage, the air is like a metal smell, or even sometimes it smells like burning rubber or something, and I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know why this is happening in our town. I don't ever recall this being as bad. It is so bad that I'm constantly having to clean the outdoor of our home on the vinyl siding because it builds up these black particles on my home. And that used to not be the case. So what are you going to do? I really would like for there to be justice in our community, because I feel very strongly that all of these deals are made with these big companies and the ones that's carrying the biggest burden are communities like mine. So something needs to be done, and they need to start monitoring the air quality over here in Perth Amboy because it has been tremendously bad. And for individuals who have respiratory problems, I'm one of them. The air, I can't. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to breathe, and it's very difficult for people to even get rescue inhalers. That's another issue that I have to address, but that shouldn't be that way. So I want to know, are you going to be putting air quality monitors in Perth Amboy? Because that's what I would like to see. Thank you.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions to better understand some of the issues that you've mentioned. I think that you've called in, and so you're not on the chat. But if there's a way for you to get us your information, we'd like to follow up with you about a number of the issues that you raised. The first is to make sure that you have information about our actions on 1,4-dioxane. We do intend to put forward an MCL on that. We do have MCLs in place on PFAS, and we're the first state in the country to do that. So I want to make sure that you have that information. We can take a look at, you mentioned the water quality report. I'm imagining it's the most recent quarterly one, so we can look at that. But if there's a way for you to send, Candace will give you our email address so that we can be responsive, especially on the last point about air quality, because some air quality impacts are extremely localized. And so what if what you're experiencing is some degree of like soot collection on your home, the side, it sounded like you were saying the side of your home, that is likely that is unlikely to be a really diffuse source of air quality impact, and more likely to be a more localized, concentrated air quality impact. So knowing where you are would help us be able to track that down if you're comfortable sharing that. So Candace is going to give you an email address.
It's environmental
Right.
justice.
Thank you for that. I've actually been in contact with Ms. Akbar. I'm the one that's been requesting to have meetings like this in the community. So I've been very, very vocal, writing letters to your department, and I have received response via email from the environmental justice coordinator. So you do have my information. So if you could communicate to me that way, I would greatly appreciate it.
We're going to ask you to send an email to this address that Candace is going to offer you right now.
And anyone else as well. So environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov.
Yeah, and then we at EPA will be able to follow up with that information also. We're just checking to see which sites and where we might have air monitoring along with the state, but we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Greg, you're next.
Hi, I'm Greg Rameau, New York, New Jersey Baykeeper. I just want to first say, Administrator Garcia, Commissioner LaTourette, Ms. Perry, Ms. Glenn, and the other staff there. I've worked in the environmental field for 30 years. I've never seen such top level and dedicated folks out on a regular basis on a particular issue. So thank you all for what you've been doing in Perth Amboy, Middlesex County, and around the state. The question I have is Perth Amboy, this is a regional question, but Perth Amboy is particularly vulnerable to flooding from coastal storms and from inland flooding because of where it's situated at the back of Raritan Bay. It's between the Raritan River and the Arthur Kill. And I wanted to ask this question. It's in regard to the U.S. Army Corps HATS study, Harbor and Tributary Study, which is aimed at addressing flooding throughout the New York, New Jersey harbor, but it has some shortcomings. And for instance, it has not included inland flooding in its study. This is a $30 billion project. In Perth Amboy, there's a tide gate going on the Arthur Kill, or in the currently favored plan. Part of Perth Amboy would be behind the tide gate, part of it outside of the tide gate. The Army Corps has not done any studies to talk about the impacts to communities that would be outside the tide gate. And I'm not expecting you to answer all of this, but my real question with all this, with Perth Amboy, Middlesex County, and the harbor at large, when would DEP and perhaps EPA, I'm not sure how EPA enters into this process, but when would you be commenting and making the state's concerns known regarding this plan? It's $30 billion. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but we don't want to wait till this moves further down the road to address some of its shortcomings. So any information there would be very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So Greg, first of all, I appreciate that. For folks who are not as attuned to what Greg is talking about, the Army Corps of Engineers has a really complex flood risk storm. I should actually call it a storm surge risk reduction project called the Harbor and Tributary Study, or HATS, that affects parts of New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and parts of New York City. This was once, many years ago, one potential alternative within this plan was a giant gate across the New York Harbor, and the former president canceled the project. And now the Biden administration brought this project back to life to evaluate other alternatives. This is specifically targeted at reducing risk from storm surge like we saw in the hurricane or superstorm Sandy context, right? This is not a project that is identified or that is being pursued to address inland flood risk. So what Greg is talking about is ways to close off channels so that a big storm surge doesn't wipe out whole communities like during Sandy. The public comment on that recently closed, and so we can make sure that to circulate to the attendees at this meeting the comments that the DEP, that New York City, and the state of New York all worked together on to present to the Army Corps. This is in its very early stages, and there's still plenty of time for communities to be heard, Greg. So I wouldn't think that the the car has left the garage, or whatever the appropriate metaphor is. It's definitely an iterative process.
Yeah, we've heard, I'll just echo that the Army Corps of Engineers, I don't know how many in the end, how many comments they got, but the whole point was go out for public comment, and they have to go back and, and take in the comments and figure out whatever revisions they may have to do. So this is going to be a longer process. So exactly, the process is not over. It just began a few months ago.
Yeah, and this is a study. This is not a project. This is the Army Corps studying what some of the options are. This is $70 billion, just to give folks a sense of what it takes to close off all of our channels and harbors to incoming storm risk. So this is a many years long conversation, and we're just at the beginning.
So Kayla, I think you are our last person online with their hand up. Please feel free to go ahead, and then we'll go to some folks in the room.
Okay. I know we've talked a lot about the Keysby proposed second power plant. I think last week, like the gentleman mentioned before, the air pollution, we saw it so bad that the sky turned yellow. I think this is a peek into our future. We have about 7 proposed power plants, pipelines, compression centers. Middlesex currently still has a D rating from the American Lung Association. I am asking, I don't know what power you guys have, but I would love for you to say no. I would love specifically for Governor Murphy to stand up and say no to an additional power plant. This power plant is not for New Jersey's needs. It's to sell power to other states. So it's polluting our neighbors in an overburdened community just to make money. It's not going back into the people that it's hurting. This company, CPV, has fallen short on their promises before. They promised us they were going to help clean us the river. They were going to give us a park. They were going to completely fix the ground, which I don't remember the word brown something. It was like toxic land. They're supposed to fix it. They did not. And now they want to do it again with the same, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Basically, end of story. We need a moratorium on pollution permits. I don't want to hear that these companies provide jobs. They're dirty jobs. They make their workers sick, community sick. It's a wasted opportunity. I think if CPV wants to work with us, they need to focus on green energy like Murphy promised us.
Kayla, thank you. So I think that is a good point for us to transition. Although there was another hand in the, I think there were two hands in the room that had non-CPV questions. So let's do, what's that? Okay. Non-CPV question or comment.
Oh, someone behind you.
Someone behind you had a hand first, sorry.
Sorry, I'll make it fast. My name's Dan Leiberts. I live in Metuchen, New Jersey. I had a specific question about the PFAS stuff with the Middlesex Water Company. The last update I have on that transition to that new plant was about a year ago, I think. I could be wrong. Maybe there was another update, but in the press release from a year ago, they said by mid 2023, they would have a new system up and running to deal with the new PFAS regulations. So do you have an update on where they're at and what we should do as citizens? And then really quick, just to add, just because I think it's important, you know, I made the effort to come here, mostly because I oppose the CPV plant for many of the reasons that Kayla pointed out, and other gentlemen. We have a D rating, terrible air quality, worse than Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as a point of comparison, which had decades upon decades of air pollutants. So I really need that to not pass as a citizen who lives here and breathes that air. I think many of us in this room feel the same way. So I do want to point that out since we're at the point of transition. But I did want that update about PFAS too, because I feel like there was a lot of communication in the beginning and then it sort of hasn't been great lately. So what do you have? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much. So I don't have the latest update off the top of my head. But significant progress was made. We've been watching Middlesex Water Like a Hawk and trying to be helpful to them and for multiple reasons, because one of the ways to diminish the PFAS impacts in the water was for them to stop using a particular well. Well, when they stopped pumping that well, it caused the water table to rise and for flooding to occur in South Plainfield, right? Because there is just one water and it is all connected. And so what that means is the well that had the PFAS impacts is not serving the water, right? And so the question becomes how they've progressed in getting the new treatment started so that they can turn that well back on. And so I don't know the latest timeline on that, but it's something that we can follow up with. If you jotted down that email address from Candace, if you want to shoot a note right there, we can get back to you with that pretty quickly. It's sort of at the fingertips type of an answer, just not my fingertips. Okay, flooding.
And then we'll go to C.
Yeah, it doesn't escape me, and I'm sure most people here, about the issues of flooding that we have, that these are problems of our own making. We're building in floodplains, we're creating ever more impervious surface. Of course, we're going to have flooding. Why are we running from the actual reasons behind why we have these problems? We've got to get out of the floodplain. We have to restore wetlands. We have to create the natural conditions that absorb the water from these storm surges. And they happen. They happened historically, and with climate change, they're only worsening. So rather than continuing to issue permits in floodplains to developers and everyone, I understand, we all want to live and we're all partly responsible for these conditions, but we need to, start making some tough choices. And, it comes also then to this CPV plant. That's also a tough choice. And we shouldn't repeat the errors that we've made in the past about making decisions that, we just sort of kick the can down the road and pursue what we know to be folly, but, for political reasons, we we'd rather take the easy way out. And I think that's a mistake. And for the future of, the residents of Perth Amboy and Keysby and all of us here in Middlesex County that, want to see the DEP and Governor Murphy step up.
I appreciate that very much. So let me respond first to the flooding issues, because one of my professional passions or pain points, interpret how you will, is flood risk reduction and flood control. We are now the first state in the country to have adopted a rule to better protect communities from flooding by using climate-informed data. And that is a cutting edge innovation to better protect people in flood zones by looking not the way we have and the way that every state around the country does at historical rainfall patterns in order to identify where and how we should build thriving communities, but look at what our current experience is and face the hard reality that that experience is going to get worse, right? We have more rainfall now than we did 20 years ago, right? And we've used 1999 numbers, right? Or we did. But to look forward, and we see that we need to manage for greater rainfall. And so what the way that the DEP stepped up was to fight really hard with the help of a lot of folks in the scientific community, folks in the advocacy community to get these new flood rules passed. And that is now, or effective next month, the new law. And so folks that are pursuing development will have to manage more stormwater. They will have to build more resiliently when they are in a flood zone. New Jersey has a lot of flood zones. You can build in a flood zone. You have to do it right. What you cannot do is build in a floodway, right? And so that's an important distinction. And we're the first state to try this. And I think we'll be successful. But it's a long game, just like our climate action is a long game as well, right? First state again to put a regulatory cap on carbon, right? Not an incentive program, not just RGGI, right? But a cap on carbon pollution, which we enacted last year, so that new stationary sources can not emit above a certain level of carbon. And that is a new thing, right? Just like we're the first state in the country to have a truly empowering environmental justice law that looks at the facility-wide impacts. Never been done before, right? Now, in many ways, this sounds like the things environmental agencies should have always been doing, but it's not the way environmental governance was built. We are building in New Jersey a new approach to environmental governance that is more proactive. Does it apply to everything? Does it apply to things that are in process right now? No, new laws never do, right? The things that have started, they get the advantage or the disadvantage, rather, of that old law. And there comes a point where the new law applies, and that's the case in our flood setting. That's the case in our carbon rule setting, and that's the case in our environmental justice law setting. And for some, that's really a disappointment, and I understand that. I do. And we are pushing the envelope in what we're requiring from environmental justice review on every application that was grandfathered, so to speak, that was in the door before our environmental justice law or our flood rules took effect, so that we're forcing folks to go above and beyond. But we don't get to completely rewrite the law from the perspective of an administrative agency. That's not the way our democracy is built. But we are doing our best. And I understand the frustration.
On the miracle technology instead of the sort of power of the Earth's processes. And that's what's getting us in trouble. Is that we believe our technology is capable of getting us out of it. And in fact, we're sort of like burying ourselves deeper. So this Catherine in Piscataway, my sense is that the real solution is that the building should be returned to wetlands, that Catherine should be, supported in, and along with her neighbors, of finding a home that is not in a flood.
You're right. And that's what the New Jersey Blue Acres program, right? The best in the country stands to do. Now, of course, that's voluntary because this is America and private property rights are a thing. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, right? But if you're looking for folks to push the envelope, this is the state that's doing it. And I understand that still falls short of folks' expectations.
Hi there, Rosella Sabatini. I'm a neighbor of yours in Highland Park.
Hello.
Hello. I am here along with many others because I am strongly opposed to the approval of the second Keys plant. Is this working? Now it's working. Okay. Hi there. I'm Rosella Sabatini. I'm a neighbor in Highland Park, and I am opposed to the approval of the second gas plant in Woodbridge for all the reasons that I think some people have already mentioned here. One thing I'm curious about, you mentioned earlier in your comments that we need to prioritize green infrastructure. And I completely agree with that idea, not just for individual residents getting rid of their oil tanks and sending us to do the right thing as individuals, but what are we doing in terms of tapping into all the funds that are being made available to us through the IRA, et cetera, to help build public and private partnerships with firms like CPV to help us build the transition away from fossil fuels. So rather than approving this second plant, which has all this ancillary infrastructure that likely goes along with it, if we're building a new plant, that means more capacity. That means they're going to need more fuel. They're going to need bigger pipelines. They're going to have to transport that fuel from wherever they're fracking it from. So this is like a never ending slippery slope. And if we don't take a stand now, and if Governor Murphy doesn't show leadership in this issue, I think that is going to be a terrible sign for all of us in Middlesex County.
So show of hands, who here wants me to know that they do not want CPV to be approved? I counted 36. I could have there. It's possible that I'm off, but I'm going to write that down. So we're not going to be able to have 36 say that they don't want this thing. But what I want you to know is that I know you don't want this thing, that we hear you. Paula will make sure I hear you. Okay. I'm going to tell you something that's really important. Okay. And I mean this with every bit of seriousness and respect. What I want doesn't matter, right? What I feel doesn't matter, right? What matters is whether or not any piece of pollution generating equipment, right, that falls under the jurisdiction of the DEP. What matters is whether that can meet what we have put in place as really aggressive standards to protect public health in our environment. That is my sphere of operation, much as it is Lisa's. Now, whether I want it, it's not allowed to matter, right? Because that's not how our system of environmental governance works. The legislature says, here are the types of things you have authority over, And then the regulatory environment says the conditions under which the DEP can say yes or no. We've made strides in New Jersey to make that piece more strict, right? And so you can be assured that I both demand and expect, will only tolerate, and will only permit the most protective thing always. But the way that those laws work, it doesn't allow us as an environmental governance entity to get at all of the chain of events that, I'm sorry, your name again? Rosella was getting at, which is not. Hold on, don't shout. We're having a conversation. Don't shout, wait and we'll talk. Yes, yes, but I'm answering somebody's question. It's rude to interrupt. No, that's not the case. That's not the case. Look, I understand that you're frustrated. I do. I understand that you're frustrated. I'm trying to answer the question that was asked. So the way that the rules and the regulations work, the way that the laws work, they don't permit a state agency to look at pipeline capacity or fracking in another state. That's not the way the laws themselves work. But what we do get to say, what we have authority over, is the emissions, the pollutants that could come out of some source in New Jersey. And for that issue, you can count on the DEP to always do the envelope aggressive pursuit of the issue. That doesn't mean I can tell you sitting here right now that it will be a yes or a no. I can't say that. That's the thing my lawyers don't want, because it is under review. But you can be sure that we will put them through their paces and look at it to an excruciatingly tough degree, so that we can be assured that we're serving the purpose of protecting public health and the environment. Right. So I'm not going to have an answer for you tonight. But I do hear you. I hear that you don't want it. I hear that. The lawyers that work for the Department of Environmental Protection? Yeah. Sir, I will tell you this. No, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this. The people who work for our Department of Environmental Protection and the Environmental Protection Agency, and the lawyers who serve us at the Department of Justice and the Division of Law, have given their entire professional lives to the protection of public health and their and our environment. They are heroes, right?
We're going to go to, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Sid Madison. I'm from Piscataway. I know David brought up the issue of that many of us here are concerned about, and all the hands went up. The suggestion, and earlier Greg remarked that your remarks and what you're telling us about highly technical stuff and all the details is greatly appreciated. I want to take a completely different tact, because that process that you're describing is not serving what we need to do. The world, the International Energy Agency, said we should not have any more fossil fuel processes. The New Jersey Board of Public Utilities said we should not have any more fossil fuels in New Jersey. And yet there are 7 projects outstanding. Okay. Now, let me go back to a solution that somebody else came up with, and I regard all you people as great, okay? But years ago, there were a series of attorneys that said, I'm not going to do that to Mr. Nixon, the president. And if you really want to have an impact, you and the folks like you should stand up to Governor Murphy and tell him to stop the 7 projects, period. Stand up and tell him to stop them. If you have to resign your job along with a bunch of other professionals, that's what we need to have done. Those 7 projects are going to make everything you're trying to control worse. Just do it. Just stop the governor from allowing those 7 projects.
I'm going to go to these 2 women and then to the councilman, and then we're going to have to wrap. But I hear you loud. I hear you loud and clear. I do.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Donna Stewart. I am the proud president of the Perth Amboy area branch of the NAACP, which covers Perth Amboy, Woodbridge, Sayreville, South Amboy, and Carteret. Before elected to this position, I have been a mother, a resident of Perth Amboy my entire life. I don't know all the technical terms. I've learned a lot here tonight, and I've been learning a lot in the last year and a half with this project, trying to shut it down. But one of the comments was, we are all responsible for our community. But my question is this, but are we all responsible for what happens to our community? Where was the town hall meeting for the residents of Catesby when this decision was made? The residents of Perth Amboy will be affected negatively. 8 of our schools will suffer from this second power plant. Do the residents of Perth Amboy know that 8 of our schools will be negatively affected by this power plant? Many of the residents of the Catesby area have no real idea of what's coming to them and to their town. Why? Because they live in a community that doesn't value them as part of their community. The young lady on the Zoom call, she spoke about how people of color feel and how we're negatively affected in the poorer communities. How does the government hear from the community? Is it only by voting? Because some of the residents in this town are not legally allowed to vote. So you can't say based on vote and what people have to say if you don't go to the communities where they are. But their children who are born here one day will be able to vote. Building another toxic gas plant in the Woodbridge would be an environmental injustice. And Commissioner, when you said injustice, that was a Freudian slip. You meant what you said. It is ridiculous to even consider such a proposal. We call on Governor Murphy and the DEP to reject it now. As a Christian, the Bible says what was meant for evil, which is politics and money, God will turn it around for good. There are people in this room that I have never met before. And on this journey, I've met a lot of wonderful people who taught me a lot of amazing things about what's happening in our town, and it has to stop. So I say to you right now in front of all of these people, and there was more than 36 people who raised their hand because I can count, and math was one of my favorite subjects. Governor Murphy and the DEP must deny CPV unnecessarily polluting another project here in our community.
Thank you for that, Reverend. Thank you.
I want to thank you for having this hearing. I think we need more of these in our different local communities. You mentioned that what the law allows you to take into consideration. Well, maybe those laws don't serve us and need to be changed, as Sid Madison said. But I have a question for you. When you evaluate the pollution or the air permit to make sure that it's, do you take into consideration the context of where this is? For example, we have Route 27, Route 1, 287, the Turnpike, and the Garden State Parkway. So what's submitted from the power plant, some other rural place, has a very different effect that when you combine it with all of this heavy trafficked area. So how do you evaluate?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the answer is that historically, right, over the last 50 years of modern environmental law, the answer was we don't, right? That's different now in New Jersey, right? Because we do. we do look beyond just this. If you're looking at a power plant or a manufacturing site, one of the things you might notice is the smokestack, right? If you think about the last 50 years of environmental law, which has broadly improved the conditions, the air quality conditions in this country, no question. Thank you, EPA. We only looked at the stack and we didn't look at all of the other issues that you mentioned, but now we do. And so we do look at the context now. So that is a beneficial change, but I can't disagree with you with respect to, maybe we need to look at different legal structures. Our legislature has a number of bills pending in that regard. A number of them sponsored by Senator Smith. So I'd encourage folks to look at that. And again, I'll say thank you. And I hear very much the passion and the energy of this crowd. And I hear the anger too, but I'm saying the passion and the energy because it's a respectful dialogue and I appreciate that. Councilman.
I'll keep this pretty short. Thank you so much for this forum. It's very informative. Perth Amboy historically has been impacted negatively due to industries. We could go on and on. It'd probably take several volumes of books to state how bad our community has been impacted. And my question is pertaining to power plant is what permits remain to be issued for the power plant? And is anything being done by the DEP to prevent this project for already overburdened community?
So I can explain where it stands. And the first thing that is important to understand is that the DEP is one of many entities that have a say in one of many government entities that have a say in what is built where and how. And so what will typically be the case is, a county or a local government may have some say, some land use authority. That's not what we say. We don't get to say where things go unless it's in a floodplain and we can tell you not to go in certain places. But in a setting like this, we would only have authority over potential for air pollution, right? And so that is the type of decision that would come before us. And so pending before the DEP is what we call a Title V major source air permit. And that has been pending at the DEP for many, many years, first submitted in, I think, 2016 or 17, before my time, right? And it's changed a little bit here and there. And then we recently required CPV to go through an environmental justice review. And so that is what is occurring right now, the environmental justice review. And there was a public hearing and a public comment process. And so right now we're at the stage where we review everything that came in, right? There's written comments, there's testimony that's offered, there's an impact statement specific to environmental justice that's done by the regulated entity. And then we've got to issue a decision based on just the environmental justice review. But that doesn't end the permitting process. It then goes into a technical review and then an ultimate decision. So I would say it has 3 stages. And so there is still plenty of time to be heard. And I am grateful that you all are here and raising your voices. And I just ask you to never stop. Sure.
Yes.
On CPV in particular?
No,
okay. What's that?
The EJ email.
No, so I would say for if it's about CPV, it's different than just all environmental justice stuff. So I don't want Candace's office to get all this influx that's just about CPV. I think there's an email address for that. So let me find out real quick. I'm sorry, I mean, I imagine that that is submitted to the DEP. Okay. I know, unfortunately, it doesn't matter. It's not your town.
Yeah, we're gonna let,
Do an EJ call here and say, if you've spoken before, can you hand the mic over to someone who hasn't spoken yet and then let them go?
Oh, no, we were gonna try to wrap because it's getting, yeah, hold on. Yeah, actually, I can. Yeah.
For CPV, you said there's an environmental justice impact statement. Where can the public?
Yeah,
find it?
during, in the public hearing process, there is environmental justice review information that is put forward to the DEP. I will make sure that we put it online if it's not already online. Candace?
so just want to thank all of you for showing up tonight, for raising your comments, your questions, and your concerns, for all of your passion. It is the only way that we get to do our jobs most effectively is if we hear directly from you all, even if it's, you know, tough conversations, we don't run away from that. Thank you so much for.
No, listen. No one is running away. And I'd ask you to, hold on a second. Hold on. Sir.
We need to.
Sir,
we
that
need to
is,
remain
so number one,
respectful.
that is enough. Second of all, there was already a public hearing on CPV. This is not the public hearing on CPV. This hearing is for this community. It is not for CPV. I understand, I understand that perspective. And that is why we created more time to hear you, right? And we do hear you. We hear you loud and clear that you do not want this approved.
One sentence.
I understand that. And you can continue to submit comments, but what I cannot do is create in this space another public hearing on an application. That is problematic, and I can't do that. Right? I tried to give people some room so I could hear directly from you, but I cannot create another hearing for CPV in this space right now.
That most people don't realize that there's only so far you can go, right? There's only so much you can do. I mean, you sit here and I understand and I respect it because I understand that's how it works. But where is the breakdown, right? Because at this point, you know, again, I worked in government. At a certain point, you're only going to be able to take the ball. Like, that's it, right? And so where can we go to be able to raise our voices so that we're not going through the motions, right? Because I also understand that government has a way of putting people who are committed to communities in front of communities without the proper tools, but just to make it appear that something is happening that is not happening. So where is the proper place for us to gauge our voice? Is that the legislator? Because none of them are here. So if that's where we need to go, then give us the tools to go where we need to go. So we can
That's
stop
a,
beating you up.
yeah, that is a really fair point. Thank you for that. So there's a couple of different places, right? So the first is within the public comment process on the CPV application itself, which I'm certain many folks here participated in. But that public comment was open for quite some time. That's now closed. But that's on one step. There's then another step, and then there's another public comment. Right? So this process is an ongoing one. So within the administrative process, I think the important thing is to be attuned to where we are on that application, and it will be very public and very apparent.
For 2.5
And many
hours.
folks are tracking this in the community that is assembled here today, and it will be on our environmental justice website, right? The stages that this takes. And your lawmakers, two of whom I was with earlier today, I understand their doors to be and their phone lines to be open to the people that they serve. So that is, that is another place to bring your concerns. But this is the process that we're engaged in with CPV is an ongoing one, and there are more opportunities as we proceed during the review to raise your voice again.
I just want to add on to that in terms of tracking and knowing information as we move through the stages that the commissioner was talking about. So the best way to stay abreast of any project that is going through the environmental justice process is to sign up for our newsletter. So my office sends out a bi-weekly EJ newsletter that has updates on when public hearings are happening. And it will tell you when our website is updated with responses to comments and final decisions on permits. And so our website is dep.nj.gov/EJ. Please see my staff in the back of the room that can get you that URL, dep.nj.gov/EJ. We have a newsletter, please sign up for that. We also have email notifications. So you can sign up to receive notifications for your county. You can sign up for Middlesex County. Anytime there is an application that's coming before the department within Middlesex County, you will get an email to alert you of that, when the public comment period is open and when it will close. That is the best way to stay abreast of information. And we are gonna. Yeah.
No, we're good.
Oh. So we're going to wrap up at this time. I understand that there are still more hands, more comments, more questions. I'm really sensitive to the fact that we did not get to everyone tonight. However, it is not lost upon us that you are committed to raising your voice about this issue. There are constraints process-wise that do not allow us to stay here all night and repeat a public hearing that already happened. Moving forward through our environmental justice regulations, we will have additional opportunities to bring projects like this under that regulatory process and require impact statements, require additional steps that applicants have to go to that unfortunately we did not have the teeth to require before those regulations are adopted. That is a process thing that we cannot change tonight. But moving forward, we are committed to going through those processes in a way that no other state in this country is doing. This is a paradigm shift in New Jersey, and we will continue to work through this process, but we cannot rehash what's already been happened, what has already happened in the past. So at this time,
Please let
I want
her
to
speak.
At this time, I want to thank you so much for. At this time, I want to thank you so much for attending. My staff will be here to take your contact information. Please email us, and I wish you a really, really good night. Thank you.
And stop the governor from allowing me to practice from the
Thank you, everyone.